good?
He's not listening.
Are you good, bro?
Oh, I'm listening. Alarm's not listening.
We are live in 3, 2.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Dan Corcoran. I served on the committee that selected the format and developed the ground rules and questions for this afternoon's debate. I will also serve as co-moderator for today's debate. Serving alongside me is John McGee, who will also moderate. The candidates were given the ground rules in advance, and do either of you candidates have any questions before we begin with the ground rules? Okay. Just a note here, the sponsoring committee recognizes the importance of free and fair expression. This debate is being broadcast live and recorded for distribution to media outlets. It is intended to present the views and opinions of the candidates. Comments from the audience will not be allowed. Invited guests are expected to behave accordingly, and any violators will be escorted from the building. On behalf of our host, Catalano, and our sponsors, I welcome you to the Palm Bay City Council Seat 4 debate between Deputy Mayor Kenny Johnson, who is seated to the left, and candidate Nathan White, who is seated to the right. Accordingly, I call this debate to order. John, could you please conduct a coin toss to determine which candidate will be the first to answer a question?
Okay, Mr. White, you call heads or tails?
Tails.
It is tails.
Very good. So, Mr. White, tell us a little bit about yourself and describe how your life experience has prepared you to be the best candidate to serve our citizens in seat 4 on the City Council.
Sure. I was born and raised in Palm Bay. I've lived here my entire life. Born and raised in the Northwest. My wife and I bought our first house together 2-3 years ago in Southwest, not far from the Fort Malabar Gun Club, for those who know the area. Wake up every morning to the chirp chirp and the pop pop. But I've loved Palm Bay the entire time. I've always had friends, even family members, that would say, you know, we need to get out of this small town. I got to go somewhere and do something. But the thing that they almost all have in common is they came back. The number of years was the question. They always came back to me. They didn't find anywhere else that felt as much like home. But I've felt that the whole time. So my experience is that I know Palm Bay. I know Palm Bay very well. I know people in Palm Bay. I know more people than I ever did before. After a year and a half of campaigning, I've been knocking on doors since June of last year. And as of this past weekend, I've knocked on 10,000 doors in Palm Bay. And it's been an incredible experience talking to so many different people from so many different areas and hearing the things that never made the news, including just the personal life experiences. Work experience-wise, I've had a lot of experience both in retail and also at the beginning of retail and in business development and management. So I know how to get good deals. I know where to look for the good deals, and it's something I was raised with too, so I'm ready to serve Palm Bay.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, tell us a little bit about yourself and describe how your life experience has prepared you to be the best candidate to serve our citizens in seat number 4 on the City Council.
Thank you, sir. So I was born and partly raised in Palm Bay. I'm an Army brat, so we traveled all over. But once my dad retired back in 2003 from Operation Iraqi Freedom, we moved back to Palm Bay in 2004, when we got hit back to back like many of you from the hurricanes. So I've been back in Palm Bay since 2004, graduated from Bayside High School, went on to play football at Charleston Southern University, came back, just like Mr. White said, a lot of us did. Came back to Palm Bay, got involved immediately working with other nonprofit organizations, different churches aside from my own, because, you know, this community put so much into me. I knew I could put some positive impact into the community as well. So in doing so, back in 2015-16, I was already attending city council meetings well before I had it in mind to run for office. So I was just listening in, trying to learn about local government, because local government is probably the biggest impact on our community as we see, which is why it's encouraging to see this crowd here. So to that point, I got involved, ran for office in 2018, because I wanted to make sure we were in the right direction as a city and as a community, and I feel like we've done a lot in the past 4 years. So that's why I'm here asking for 4 more years to continue the growth and to continue the positive impact we've made to our community.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this question offers an opportunity for rebuttal, but certainly we're obligated to ask. On to question 2, Mr. John McGee.
Mr. Johnson, what do you cherish most about this community of Palm Bay?
I would say I cherish the community engagement, whether it's a packed council meeting regarding the discussion of appointment or special election, or coffee with the cop, or the engagement here. Regardless, one of the biggest things I wanted upon being elected was just more engagement from the community. Whatever that looked like, whether we agreed or disagreed, whether we're talking about over at the VFW when we had conversations about the golf course, or if we're over here talking about a different conversation. The engagement is the best thing. The main thing I want to see improvement in is engagement from our youth to that point. You know, it's just as much their community as it is ours. So that's the main improvement that I would like to see in regards to engagement, but it's also the same thing I cherish the most.
Mr. White?
You have a minute and 30 seconds. What do you cherish most about this community?
Sure. I would say the community aspect itself. I hear a lot, especially when it comes to the political, people talk about the city of Palm Bay, and I feel like they don't focus enough on the community of Palm Bay, because they are not the same thing. The city does not always reflect the people. I think we've all experienced that to one degree or another. So the amount of community, I know that I've gone to Church on the Rock, which is actually technically in Melbourne, though it's right next to Palm Bay High football field. I've gone there my whole life, and it's always been that, and my neighbors have always been that extended family that is sometimes even closer than family. That aspect of you can go to your neighbor for help, you can go to your neighbor, specific example, to borrow their generator during one of those hurricanes, because for some reason only one side of the street lost power. But things like that where you can reach out and people understand what you're going through or what's happening, and they understand that we're in this together. So they can reach out to each other. And if you can't help, that's also understood. And if you can help, you are. So that sense of community has always been something that I cherish the most about Palm Bay. If we were going to talk physical, then I'd probably have to say probably Turtle Creek.
Mr. Johnson, do you have 30 seconds to say anything? No? Mr. White? Good.
Okay, on to question 3. Mr. White, why are you running for the city council, and if elected, what will be your priorities?
Sure. I'm running for city council because aside from living here my whole life, my wife and I want to stay. You know, we bought a house not with the intention of reselling it or flipping it or anything. We want to raise our family in not too long in Palm Bay. We want our kids shortly to be able to grow up in the community that we love so much and that we've cherished for so many years. And we want it to be as good or better than it was when we were growing up here. And more closely we followed and paid attention to and researched what's been going on in Palm Bay city government over the years, the more we felt a responsibility to do something. Because if you're going to complain about something, then you better be ready to do something about it yourself. So there is simply that sense of personal responsibility. If I want this place to be as good as I remember it, to be as good as it was when I was growing up, then I need to do my part to make sure that's the case. So I'm running for Palm Bay City Council to end the wasteful spending that I believe has become the norm, become accepted as status quo, and use those funds instead of where they should have been used from the start, on the necessities, on our first responders, fire, police, on our roads that have been neglected for decades, and on our utilities as we continue to grow.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, why are you running for the city council, and if elected, what will be your priorities?
Thank you, sir. So since 2018, there has been a lot accomplished, but there's still so much more to be accomplished. Speaking of the comprehensive plan update, back in 2019, I was the lone council member that initiated that. Here we are, 2022, we're still not upon completion of it, and it's not going to be completed until 2023. So this is something that I initiated, and I want to make sure we see through in regards to the update of what land use is going to happen or what zoning categories certain parts of the city are going to look like. Being that I was the main contributor to it, things like that, I'm looking to make sure I see it through. The roads, we mentioned the roads, that was voted in the same time I was voted in 2018, and I want to make sure we get through it all the way and make sure all the roads are paved. That's why I made sure we put together a road maintenance policy, because I want to make sure what happened 20, 30 years ago doesn't happen 20, 30 years in the future. There's a policy in place to make sure the roads that are being paved now will stay to be maintained years down the line. So there's several initiatives that were completed and some that weren't completed. So I want to make sure we complete them all. And I feel like I'm the best to do the job, being that I've already taken a lot of action and gotten a lot of results.
Thank you. Mr. White, do you have a rebuttal?
I do. I feel like it's important to mention that the road bond program is also already at least 2 years behind, and it's been finally become part of the discussion that it's also not enough to fix all of the roads in Palm Bay. So there's still not been an open discussion about exactly where that line is going to be drawn, but I know there's going to be somebody that's unhappy about it. And also, it is a past issue, but it's frightening to say that their road maintenance has only been a reoccurring line item in the city's budget. This new budget that we've just put up is only the third that it has a reoccurring line item for road maintenance, and it's the first year that it's even reached $1 million for the year, prior to $750,000 a year, which is enough to do about one road.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, rebuttal?
Yes, sir, definitely. When we speak about end waste, the budget's accessible to every single person in the city of Palm Bay. So Bill Batten, the watchdog of the city, to any other person, I want to hear specific examples of what waste we're looking to end. We're talking about the road maintenance. Yes, it's been $750,000, but since being on council, 3 out of the 4 years, we got funding for it. When we talk about police and fire, these are things we're trying to prioritize with a tight budget. So I want to hear where specifically, since we all have access to the public record of the budget, are we looking at ending waste?
Thank you. Mr. McGee?
Mr. Johnson, as the emerging impacts of inflation challenge our ability to meet the needs of the city, what strategies do you favor to better manage the city's municipal spending and avoid an increase in taxes?
So that was primarily why I was going against the 3% cap in the first budget workshop. I was the first council member to speak because Mayor asked who wants to speak, and I was the first one to speak. While we need to address the police and fire and everything, I made sure it was clear, hey, this is not the year to try to do that. When we see the inflation, the reason why we're looking at a shortage of funding for the road bond program is because the rising costs on asphalt, the rising costs, and the shortage on construction workers. So it's all contribute to inflation. So being that as it may, I told council this is not the year to do that, but it was a 4-1 vote. So that was the first thing I was looking to address. Other than that, when we talk about the fire station or other projects, once learning that through our revenue loss, we can address it with the ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan funding, which was from the federal government. I was looking to reallocate funds in different ways, but I didn't get council's approval on that either. So one thing as a council member, you can't do anything by yourself. You got to be willing to work with your council members and be inclusive, not divisive. So I tried the best I could, but I made sure it was out in the public that these were opportunities we can take to move forward and look at properly funding other areas.
Thank you. Mr. White, as the emerging impacts of inflation challenge our ability to meet the needs of the city, what strategies do you favor to better manage the city's municipal spending and avoid tax increases?
Sure. Well, step one would be, I would do, although we'll see what happens on November 8th, I would do everything I can to protect our 3% cap. The 3% cap on property tax increases, which as of this year has now been violated or exceeded half of the years it's been in place. Prior exceeded for natural disasters such as hurricanes, where their governor declared a state of emergency. And as the charter requires, an emergency or critical need is what's required to break the cap. Whereas this year it was decided that the city not being so great with money is enough of an emergency to do so. So that's why it's being exceeded by 12.04% beyond the 3% cap that's supposed to be respected. So I would say being stricter with staff in the budget, saying that we need to buckle down, we need to cut any waste possible, we need to pull back on positions that we've been paying for years, despite them being vacant all of those years, and that money just being shuffled around. That would be one of the primary things as well with regards to pulling back spending on that. Also, we would need to pull back on new projects, such as the $4 million the city has set aside to build a city-owned RV campground in Fred Poppy Regional Park, while approving a privately owned RV campground or RV park across the street. That, to me, is the epitome of waste.
Mr. Johnson, you have 30 seconds to vote.
Yes, to have two different RV parks, that's capitalism. That's what America was based off of. So I don't see an issue with that. But to the next point, what I was saying in regards to end waste, we all have access to the same budget. We can speak on public comments on what we think is wasteful or what we don't think is wasteful. So I think that was appropriate time to address those concerns during the budget hearing cycle. Other than that, I would want to encourage everyone to stay in tune next year for the budget workshop, regardless of who's on it, because you'll see that you can see the full budget the same way we as council members see it as well.
Mr. White, 30 seconds.
I would just say that I was there for the budget process, the budget workshops, and in fact, I was one of the lone voices, so to speak, on the Citizen Budget Advisory Board leading up to the setting of the budget. But after more and more information came out and the tax increase was passed, I was certainly not the lone voice. And at the last meeting of the Citizen Budget Advisory Board, I was named vice chair by a unanimous vote, because the things that I was talking about that seemed a little bit out there turned out to be factually accurate, because I do have a copy of the budget. In fact, I have a copy of a couple of the budgets, and I go over them regularly because it's infuriating, and you have to spend time going through it a few times.
Thank you.
On to question 5, Mr. White, Palm Bay's public safety emergency response times are below standards and need to be improved. What actions do you believe should be taken to address this issue?
Absolutely, that is definitely the case. I know that the national average for response times for fire rescue, for instance, is supposed to be between 4 to 8 minutes. Obviously, 8 would not be ideal, but it's in the range. We have large sections of Palm Bay where the response time is 10 to 11 minutes. For those that know about the mechanics of the house fire, you better just call your insurance company at that point. In those situations, that's the consequence of not properly funding our first responders in the first place. We are 3 fire stations behind where we could be. And with regards to the ARPA fund spending that was already brought up, we got $18 million from the federal government in coronavirus relief funds in the form of ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act. $10 million of it was in a category called revenue lost, which was eligible to be used for our first responders. And to my opponent's credit, he was the one that asked, when $2 million was being requested for something else, should we hold off on this until after the workshop we had planned to see if maybe we could use this on fire? But the unfortunate answer, as explained by the city manager, the deputy city manager, and the city attorney in turn, was that $10 million council had already allocated to other things. A couple of which I would not argue with. In fact, I would argue for heavily, like the body cams, but that was less than $1 million. But $7 million of that $10 million went to the city's new office building. That is not prioritizing public safety to allocate $10 million before realizing you've done it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, Palm Bay's public safety emergency response times are below standards and need to be improved. What actions do you believe should be taken to address this issue?
So there have been several actions that have been taken, and let me start off by, this isn't an issue that happened in the past 4, 6, 8 years. This is from decades of the city growing and our police department not growing at the same rate. So to that point, we as a council gave our police officers increased pay raise. So they're second behind Brevard County Sheriff's Office. Because one thing we're seeing is police officers starting to leave and go up to other agencies, Orange County, Sebastian, things of that nature. So we did that to reel them back in. But to that point, now we need to expand upon how many officers we have, which is what the council 4-1 did with the funding that they got by going over 3% cap. So while I didn't condone going over the 3% cap this year, I understand it because they want to decrease. We all want to decrease the response times within the city. So that was the mechanism they saw to do it, where I also saw, after it was brought up that we were short on funding for the fire station, that's when I was like, okay, what can we do? Where can we get funding from it? And then that's when I brought it to council's attention that, hey, we can reallocate the ARPA funding. And in doing so, we can put some money aside for the building E that we want, but we could also finish up with the fire station. And both could be funded, but it wasn't considered at that time, so.
Thank you. Mr. White, 30-second rebuttal.
No.
Awesome, very good. Mr. McGee.
Mr. Johnson, the Majors Golf Club was closed on June 19th, and the property has fallen into a state of disrepair. This crown jewel facility provided important social and recreational benefits to the residents and the visitors alike. The impact to the community has been devastating, and the residents have been looking for a solution to restore what has been lost. In your view, what steps should the city of Palm Bay take to get this Arnold Palmer designed golf course reopened in Bayside Lakes?
All right, so, full disclosure, either last council meeting or the council meeting before, council gave direction on having staff looking to purchase the golf course. I'll be candid, now it's the lone voice that voiced concerns on us purchasing the golf course, because I was feeling that, when we have to make sure we fund our police and fund our fire as well as our roads, that there are more pressing matters to utilize general fund or undesignated funds towards. But to that point, with council giving that direction, I'm like, me trying to be a problem solver, I'm like, what else can we do? The golf course can be used for affluent water, and that's something that we might be able to use utilities funds, utilities revenues for. Or being that it's the Arnold Palmer golf course, possibly tourist dollars, because this can be a tourist destination. So while I was opposed to using general fund dollars, I'm trying to find other solutions to do that. I recently connected, and that's something that, I was able to do that. Of course, my opponent couldn't do because he's not in right now. But I connected Suzanne Sherman with Heather Joyner in regards to trying to, broker some type of relationship, just like I've done with many other people here in the golf course community. I try to broker a relationship so a deal can be made, because that's one thing we both agree on. We want to keep the golf course. It's just about finding the best solution to get it there.
Thank you. Mr. White, the Majors Golf Club has closed on June 19th and has fallen into disrepair. This crown jewel facility provided important social and recreational benefits to the city, the residents and visitors alike. The impact to the community has been devastating, and residents have been looking for a solution to restore what has been lost. In your view, what should the citizens in the city of Palm Bay take to restore this Arnold Palmer designed golf course to be reopened in Bayside Lakes?
Certainly. I do agree wholeheartedly. The Majors is a jewel for Palm Bay. It's something that we have that is unique. When I say we're struggling to keep it right now, but it's something that's been unique. It's always been an incredible thing to have in your cities. And we have not just a golf course, not just 2 golf courses. We have the Arnold Palmer golf course. Thank you very much. Melbourne has several courses, but I don't think they have an Arnold Palmer course. One thing that can be done, that is being done, is at the last Planning and Zoning meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board passed a textual amendment to the Code of Ordinances, kind of closing a loophole. To not get into the weeds, what it does is it would require that the owner of the property not only maintain the landscape within a 15-foot barrier of the edge of the property, but actually maintain the entire property, which is going to be a very big win, so to speak, for the situation. because using the property going down the drain, so to speak, in a physical manner as a point of leverage to try and get what you want from the situation is not appropriate, it's not professional, it's not acceptable. So the closing that loophole is going to be a big step in the direction of bringing back to the table rational ideas, because we do need to keep golf course.
Mr. Johnson, 30-second rebuttal?
No, sir.
No? Mr. White? Okay.
On to the next question. Mr. White, should Palm Bay consider an annual cap on the rate of housing development to ensure our infrastructure, our streets and roads, and our public safety resources can keep pace with the city's expansion?
I would say I wouldn't be completely opposed to the idea as a rock solid, but I don't think it's necessary. Similar to the building moratorium, it's something that shouldn't be necessary. All of the developments that got residents so riled up in different fashions in different areas, all of them came before council. All of them were voted on by council, and they approved them. And then they came back and said, well, we need a moratorium to stop them from asking, because we apparently can't say no. That's a problem that simply shouldn't exist, and passing a moratorium to stop yourself, or a cap to stop yourself from having to do the math yourself. That's not, it's not helpful, or at least it shouldn't have to be helpful, I suppose you could say. So I'm not saying it's something that should never be passed, but it shouldn't be necessary.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, should Palm Bay consider an annual cap on the rate of housing development to ensure our infrastructure, our streets and roads, and public safety resources can keep pace with the city's expansion?
I don't think it needs to be an annual cap. With the update of the comprehensive plan, the reason why it was such a big deal, comprehensive plan is supposed to be updated every 5 years. It had been 20 years from when I brought it up. So think about it. If that comprehensive plan was updated every 5 years, it encompasses everything from infrastructure, from zoning, land use. A lot of the issues that we're having now in regards to attempts for spot zoning or things of this nature over here with infrastructure, they would have been addressed. So more so, I think the need is for us to stay on top of it, and that's why I talked to the consultant for the comprehensive plan update that we need to have a policy in place that mandates the city to make sure they're having comprehensive plan updates every 5 years, so this doesn't happen again. That's how I think you correctly address it. I don't think it needs to be annual, but 3, maybe 5 years, just to make sure we're on the right track, which is going to take some time, but I think that might be a more appropriate approach.
Thank you. Mr. White, rebuttal, 30 seconds.
Well, the only rebuttal, council hadn't been approving every project. There's projects that were contentious that council did approve, like the commercial project off Palm Bay Road across from West Melbourne Hemmock Landings. But then there's projects that were controversial, like Fallon Boulevard or Biddle Street, that were voted down. So the thing with the moratorium was we're seeing an influx of spot zoning attempts when we're trying to complete the comprehensive plan update. So what I was saying, I was trying to tell council is, let's slow down for a brief moment, finalize this comprehensive plan, and then we can move forward with what we want as a city.
Thank you. Mr. McGee?
Mr. Johnson, a large share of development proposals, following on what we were just talking about, coming to the city council for approval require both a change to the existing land use designation and also a change in zoning. This is often met with resistance from surrounding property owners who have concerns about their property values, the neighborhood integrity, and the quality of life. What would you do to protect the character of existing neighborhoods while permitting an acceptable level of growth?
I think I've already done what I've said I would do, and that's engage with the community. With the golf course, I had to be very careful because it was a quasi-judicial matter. But one thing I did was speak with the VFW, like, hey, let's have an open meeting, and I can share what I can share on this item on, how people need to move forward, whether it's working towards making sure you attend the planning and zoning meeting, what topics to touch on, and then going on to city council meeting, which that item never did. But I wanted to make sure everybody was well informed on how to address. So that's one thing. I think it comes to education and a willingness to learn, listen and learn, because I'm not going to act like I know everything about every community. Each community within Palm Bay, you got Turkey Creek, Lockmar. There's so many different, like Palm Bay is so diverse within itself, within different communities. So having a willingness to listen and walk into the neighborhoods and see for yourself, like with the Fallon Boulevard, they were talking about the traffic impact was going to be minimal. I drove down there myself and talked to neighbors and saw like, no, there's no way this can happen. And then sure enough, we voted it down. So having a willingness to engage and vice versa.
Thank you. Mr. White, the large share of community development proposals coming to the city council for approval require both a change to the existing land designation and a change in zoning. This is often met with resistance from surrounding property owners who have concerns about their property values, neighborhood integrity, and quality of life. What would you do to protect the character of existing neighborhoods while permitting the acceptable level of growth?
Sure. I would absolutely agree with reaching out to those communities more and more often than we have been. I know that when the rezoning proposal came forward for that area by Fallon, I went and knocked some of those neighborhoods, knocked on some doors there, and it was enlightening to hear people's responses. And as Councilman Johnson mentioned, how much the reality of the situation differed from what staff had reported and from what the developer's plans had reported. And we say it's not going to have a traffic impact, but pretty much every time that statement has been made, it's not been very true. The number of roads that we have that are not just filled with potholes, but single lane in each direction, and then you try to add 800 homes next to it, 400 homes next to it, 1,200 homes next to it, and say it's not going to have a traffic impact. All that tells me is that you don't have a car, maybe. Reaching out to those neighborhoods directly and at a larger scale, increasing the width, for instance, the city is required to notify residents within a certain distance. I think that distance needs to be substantially widened because a lot of times the developer ends up only talking to maybe half, more like a third of the residents that would truly be impacted by those changes. So widening that range would be this first step, I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Rebuttal?
Now, the only rebuttal I would say is being engaged with the community. I saw that Titusville had mandatory citizen participation plan meetings, where for any type of project that's coming before you, you have to have a citizen participation plan meeting for the residents to engage. That's something I brought before city council, and planning and zoning it passed unanimously, because that's another way for the applicant or developer to hear from the community, yeah, we're for this, or heck no, get that out of our community, not in our backyard. So that's all.
Mr. White, good? Thank you.
Moving along to the next question. Mr. White, what changes are you sponsoring for Palm Bay's comprehensive plan update?
Changes for the comprehensive plan update. One of the things that I'm driving forward is I think we really need a plan for the compound. The compound is something that the majority of people in Palm Bay know about. They know it by name. It's to the point where the compound shows up on a lot of maps, despite it being not an official name. But it's something that's been kind of a recreational scar on the city for far too long. A large portion of the property there is owned by the city, but not all of it. And that causes some problems with planning. And I think we need to take a very hard and long look at it and talk to developers, talk to landowners out there, talk to everyone that we can involved to see what we can do with it so that it no longer remains the clandestine death trap that it kind of is. And possibly use it to create something unique in Palm Bay yet again. We have a golf course, but we have room out there for something else interesting. And with the extension of the St. John Heritage Parkway, it would suddenly become a lot more accessible to a much broader area. So it's something that if we don't start paying attention to and do something with carefully, with the future in mind, someone else will. as has happened too many times. And we don't want another situation like many that we've had in Palm Bay.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, what changes are you proposing for Palm Bay's comprehensive plan update?
Thank you. I'll touch on the compound first as well, but specifically with the compound, I think that can be a prime area. Since we're low on industrial, that can be light industrial or heavy industrial area. We can, the increase in the space industry is not just going to happen in Cape Canaveral. We can have jobs where they're building, you know, rockets down here in Palm Bay. Why not have them in the compound where, you know, they can make more noise out there, they can do more construction or building, but it's not going to affect people because it's far outside. So that's one specific example. Not totally sold on it, but it's something we can do. And yes, the city owns a lot of property, but people all across the globe own property in the compound. So in order to move forward with something big like that, another step will have to take land assemblage, where you're acquiring different amounts of land to try to put something forward. Other than that, Babcock Street, the same way, if you're going towards Melbourne, both sides of Babcock Street have a lot of commercial. I think the same could happen on the other side of Babcock Street, over closer towards Miko, going towards Sunrise Elementary. That way, residents down in that area can have restaurants aside from Copper Chimney and Beef O'Brady's. We have more availability in Palm Bay. So you don't have to go to Hemmock Landings, which is nothing wrong with it, but you don't have to go to Hemmock Landings or All Galley to enjoy good food. You can stay within your own community and enjoy it as well.
Mr. White, rebuttal?
Don't mind Copper Chimney.
I like Copper Chimney too. I like it too.
No, I know you did. It's fine. No, I would say that area as well is obviously one that needs to be focused on. I would agree with that. The other, since we're getting into it, one of the other things that I've talked with a couple business owners about is the possibility for the compound. I'd love to talk to anybody after. Of actually trying to get into a recreational vehicle like an ATV, kind of a park, making it more official. A lot of people use it for that now and love it for that now, except it's extremely dangerous. So the idea of renovating that into a professional and safe environment, that's also something that's not located anywhere near us. So it would be the sole location for that kind of a draw, and also wouldn't require all of the space either. So you'd still have room for some other options there, some other projects.
Deputy Mayor Johnson?
No, sir.
Mr. McGee?
Mr. Johnson, what are your budget priorities and how will they impact the formation and sustenance of families in the city of Palm Bay?
The main priority for me is police and fire, and make sure we get more police and fire as well as fire stations to make sure we're protecting our city, which are, don't get me wrong, our law enforcement and our first responders have been doing an amazing job. But just like the chief said, the days of doing more with less are over. We want to make sure we expand upon that. And aside from that, infrastructure, the widening of Malabar Road, the widening of Babcock Street, the finalizing of St. John's Heritage Parkway so it can connect all the way through and free up some of this traffic. And this is something I was going to bring up tomorrow during the council meeting, but taking a look at the exit I-95 getting off Malabar. I knew the young woman who was killed in that fiery accident, and taking a look with FDOT on what we can do to make sure, you know, it's safer in that area. Because we see a lot of people coming off the exit and not slowing down. So it's a partially accountability, but the other token, we as elected officials and local government should see what we can do to help with that as well. So that infrastructure ties in with safety. So I would say those two will be the top priorities.
Thank you. Mr. White, what are your budget priorities and how would they impact the formation and sustenance of families in the city of Palm Bay?
Sure. My budget priorities would be our police department and our fire department. Building those fire stations needs to be probably the top priority. Just making sure that we have the responders near enough to avoid the situations that we discussed before. I believe is of paramount importance. We've been upgrading and replacing old equipment, which has been a big help, but there's still a great number of places where that has not been done and still needs to be done, especially with our police department. In fact, the number of times that I've found the record of police cars being towed away from scenes they responded to because they just wouldn't start again is not acceptable. So upgrading the remainder of those vehicles is going to be probably the top priority for the police as far as equipment. Making sure that all of their vehicles are reliable, both getting them there and getting them back when they respond to a call. So fire stations, the police vehicles, and some other equipment mixed in there as well. And then, of course, the roads, making sure that the roads not only get done, but get done well and properly. There's been a lot of reports of that not exactly happening. And that would include building a plan for widening a lot of our roads that should have been widened a long time ago.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Not really more of a rebuttal, but more of a comment. Just like the housing market, there's a shorting of houses. Council's given funding for police vehicles, but they can't find the police vehicles. So that's the hang up. Like right now, we have an item tomorrow to try to, expedite that process of finding police vehicles so they can get the help they need. But just like with houses, it's scarce, but we're working towards trying to get that accomplished.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Since we have the opportunity, I would say one other thing, just because I talk about the other items so much, one thing that would be slightly further down on the list is upgrading the city's traffic system. Our traffic system is far out of date and it is not effective. Upgrading a city's traffic system to one that is integrated with each other as well as the regular flow of traffic it has the possibility, it has in other cities when introduced, to reduce commute times by 15%, 20% even in some cases. It can provide faster response times for our first responders as well, because it can be linked into their systems so that when they're coming, the lights act accordingly to make sure their path is clear. So I would say that would be one of the other top priorities.
Thank you.
Next question, Mr. White. What should the city of Palm Bay be doing to attract recreational, cultural, and artistic activities for the residents of Palm Bay and the region?
Artistic and cultural, you said?
Recreational, cultural, and artistic.
Sure. For recreational, my thought goes back to the idea that I've talked to a couple of people about of an alternative vehicle park in the compound area. I think that has a real benefit. If a fair amount of people are willing to go out there and risk their lives to do it right now, as it stands, I think we'd be able to draw a lot more people with a safe and healthy environment for that. So I think that would be one of the biggest, easy, so to speak, jumps for recreational, should it be deemed plausible to go forward. For artistic and cultural, it is, I would say it's difficult and almost in vain to discuss how you can increase artistry. It kind of comes from within. If that's going to be something that's going to be produced, you should simply be open to it, welcome to it. So I would like the idea of the city looking into possibilities of doing something similar to what the Eau Gallie Art District has done, when there's a large open wall on a city building or a private building, talk to the owners about the possibility of using it as a local art project. Not exactly forcing something to happen, but if you have artists that are interested, see if you have business owners who have large blank walls that would be happy to have that combined into a beautiful piece that the whole community could enjoy.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, what should the city of Palm Bay be doing to attract recreational, cultural, and artistic activities for the residents of Palm Bay and the region?
Thank you. So I would say art-wise, I think we've done a great job in regards to partnering with nonprofits, hosting organizational events out in Fred Poppy Park or other things that encompass diversity. You have the Hispanic culture and Christmas extravaganza. These have been great opportunities to encompass the whole community to join together and join in festivities on the art side, as well as celebrating the accomplishments of many others. So on the recreation side, one thing I have been working on for the past 2 years, which has been rough because they prefer Orlando over us, is doing like a Tough Mudder or a Spartan race, things like that to try to come here because that brings people here from all across the community, from Orlando, from Sebastian River, and they're going to have to stay in hotels in Palm Bay, and they're going to spend money here, and they might even see, hey, maybe I want to relocate, maybe I want to raise a family here. And those are things that I think are big as well. To the next point, establishing the downtown Palm Bay. We're moving forward with it, but that can be our own All Galley Art District. So we're moving forward with the Palm Bay downtown towards US 1, right off the water. So unlike Melbourne, ours is going to be waterfront. So I'm excited about that too. And that could be a prime opportunity for art and recreation.
Thank you. Mr. White?
I would say that one of the things that hasn't been, I'm hopeful for the downtown concept for the waterfront area, but I think one of the things that hasn't been addressed enough is that Palm Bay is huge, geographically huge. And I don't think, even though it seems satisfactory because we've wanted a downtown for a long time, we need more than one. And one doesn't have to be the same size as the other, but we need to be looking at something else of a similar variety, not necessarily even duplicating, but something else comparable, so to speak, in the more southwest kind of area, southwest, southeast, maybe northwest, somewhere farther away, so that we have multiple options and things that people don't have to cross the entire city to get to.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson?
Thank you. So to that point, it's kind of backwards if you look at it. Downtown Palm Bay is looking at being in the northeast, and we have Emerald Lakes in the southeast, which can technically be considered uptown if you want. But I think establishing both of those and moving those both forward provide opportunities for everyone to, go from here and go from there, or have a variety of options on what they can do within one city.
Thank you. We're at the 2:45 mark. Okay. Want to do one more question, or if we're ready to do one more? Okay, John? 12?
Number 12. This is a good question. In your view, what is the single most overlooked opportunity in Palm Bay, Mr. Mayor, that the city should do to harvest a benefit from it?
Overlooked opportunity.
What have we missed?
I would say capturing commercial businesses. I know for myself, I personally reach out to Top Golf, Dave & Buster's, PF Chang. These are things that I try to do on my downtime, just to shoot an email, and sometimes Top Golf responded, but many others didn't. But I think, if we get more push on projects like that, they will come, because we do have the density for it. We do have the land for it, clearly, but that's something I think we can harp on even harder, because we have a bigger population than Melbourne. So we have the people who will spend the money and spend the cash and invest in those businesses as well. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things we need to push is commercially, because if we also attract those commercial businesses, not only does it give the community opportunity to spend their dollars locally, but it also can alleviate some of the tax burden on the residents, because commercial tax base is actually higher than the residential tax base. So that can also, it's a 2-for-1 deal, I see it. So that's something I want to make sure we don't pass the buck on, but we address accordingly.
Thank you. Mr. White, in your view, what is the single most overlooked opportunity in Palm Bay? An opportunity that should the city do harvest a benefit from?
I would say recognize our own work. Palm Bay has acted like a back burner city for decades. We are the largest city in Brevard. We are the second largest city in all of Central Florida, only barely smaller than Orlando. We are not a second-class city. We have said yes to so many developers, so many projects, so many ideas, just because we seem so happy that they asked. But we're worth more than that. We're worth more than saying yes to everyone who will even offer to build here. We have the opportunity, partially because of our space, to grow into whatever we want. We're only 40% built out. We don't need to say yes to everything, and we have the time to think about it. We have the time to decide what we want to be and grow into that, and grow smart into that, so that we be able to sustain it in the future, so that we don't have to live with the consequences of that rezoning that not everybody knew about back in 2022, once we're raising more kids here, or once your kids are raising kids here. We have the opportunity to make Palm Bay not only whatever we want it to be, but something that the entire state will look to for that unique thing that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson? No? Mr. White?
I would just say, I mean that with my whole heart. Palm Bay is already special. It's usually just the people that are here that are able to see it. Some people visit and see it, it's true. And they'll come by and for some other reason, maybe just to visit somebody that is here, and it starts to get to them. Say, wow, this place is really nice. I guess I do understand why you live here. And of course, the one of us that does live here that we're talking to, we just have to smirk at them and say, oh, you're starting to see it. We can be something incredible and something that other people recognize from farther away as incredible, because we already are. We just need everybody else to see it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the candidates if you allow us an opportunity to just ask one more question. We're at 10 minutes of 2 right now, 10 minutes of 3 right now. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay with that? Mr. White, recent development in Palm Bay has been principally multifamily apartment or condo units or smaller homes around 1,400 square feet in single-family residential communities. Higher-end, large, single-family homes, which would be attractive to STEM professionals, have not been among the recent offerings. Should Palm Bay encourage development of some larger homes in higher-end community future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the need for that and the potential benefit of that is one of the things that's been so sad about the almost complete loss of our rural residential zoning. It's been whittled down to almost nothing, as Bill Batten could definitely tell you. But that kind of an area is something that people look for. It's something that people long for. To have some people, you cannot describe a dream home to them that doesn't start with the fact that it's not visible from the road. And you can't do that on, 0.25, 0.24 acres, 0.26 acres, maybe if you're on a corner. We need to make sure that at this point, it's not even heat. We need to make sure that we designate areas for those larger lots, larger home areas, so that people can live that life that they want and that they can, work in those STEM fields or perhaps even create the business here that would have those STEM jobs. So at this point, I think it's kind of beyond saving that kind of an area, that kind of zoning, and more into deciding where it should be and getting it back up to the amount that it should have been in the first place.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, recent development in Palm Bay has been principally multifamily apartment or condo units or smaller homes around 1,400 square feet in single-family residential communities. Higher-end, large, single-family homes, which would be attractive to STEM professionals, have not been among the recent offerings. Should Palm Bay encourage development of some larger homes in higher-end communities in the future?
So there have been times where high-end homes, high-end projects have been approved, and there's also been times where high-end areas have been preserved and high-end areas haven't been preserved. One that was preserved, which we'll talk about, is Cricket Drive. There was an attempt twice to turn Cricket Drive where they had high-end areas. If you go down Charles, you go off Babcock, go on to Charles, go way in the back, there's high-end areas that was attempted to be turned into Cricket. They're called it the Cricket Drive Apartments. That's something council, I myself, as well as Councilman Anderson, talked with the community, reached out and saw the area. I'm like, whoa, this is no way, because it was one way in, one way out. Prime example. So to that point, it was shot down. It was shot down by council. And then the other time, they didn't even bother. They withdrew their application because they saw the writing on the wall, I believe. So while there have been times where we've done it, I think the comprehensive plan also provides the opportunity to find other areas that where we can, focus on that. Because when we talk about multifamily, single housing, it's needed. It is needed in regards to making sure we can have an affordable lifestyle, because it's all about supply and demand. If you only have this much housing, but you have this many people trying to get housed, it's going to be an issue. And that's where you see a lot of the increase in rent prices, or what you saw with Goldman Sachs happen, which me and my opponent have both talked about multiple times that we agree on. Like, that's not what we want. That's not what we want for our community. So,
Thank you. Mr. White?
I would just add that it's not always developments, and it doesn't need to always be developments. You don't need a large business to come in and create a neighborhood in order to have those types of homes. A lot of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want to sign an HOA contract if they don't have to. A lot of people want control over their property, more control over their property, which is part of why they want more of it in the first place. So I think facilitating areas for that, for being able to purchase a single lot for that home that you'd like to create of an appropriate size is going to be very important as well, not just these pre-planned communities.
Deputy Mayor Johnson?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. I think we've reached the end of our back and forth question and answer section. The next portion of, and the final portion of the debate will include closing statements by each of the candidates. As the winner of the coin toss, we've designated Mr. White to go first. And Mr. White, you have 3 minutes for a closing statement.
Sure. Well, again, like I said, on top of being here as long as I have, I want to stay. I want Palm Bay to be everything that it can be. And I want people that have been here the whole time, as long as I've been or longer, to be happy with what it becomes and to be vocal and have a say in what it becomes. I want people to be heard as they often have not been. And I want a council that does what is in the best interest of the people, even if the people aren't watching, because I feel like that has happened too many times. So I want to get citizens more involved, residents more involved in the process, but also keep them informed, which is why throughout my campaign, I've done recap videos on council meetings, because not everyone has time to sit through a 5, 6, 7 hour council meeting. So I try to do 10 minutes or so here at the bullet points. Feel free to look it up if anything caught your attention. And that's something that I've pledged to continue to do, whether I win or not, because residents need to be informed. The only question will be how I introduce myself at the beginning of the video. But that's something that I'm going to continue to do, is to keep residents informed, keep residents involved. No more big changes to your city happening in the dark. No more upsetting changes to ordinances being passed at 12:45 a.m. After everybody went home. No more discussions about taxes being raised at 1 in the morning after everybody went home. No more trying to change ordinances to mess with elections after everybody's gone home after midnight. I want the residents to know what's going on, to be vocal about how they feel about it, so that when we do grow into what we want to be, we're all happy. So vote nay.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Johnson, we've allocated 3 minutes for your closing comments.
Thank you, sir. Upon getting on city council 4 years ago, there was a long laundry list of things to try to fix, correct, or improve upon on city council. I feel we've done a great job in addressing a lot, but there's still much more to accomplish. One of the first things once I got on, Palm Bay City Council meetings were only streamed on the internet. They weren't streamed on Facebook. So the millennial of me was like, hey, Facebook is a platform where people can share it, where, you know, I share it, and then you see it, sir, and then you share it, and people on your platform can see it as well. So, you know, I felt that was a prime opportunity to show what's going on in the city. Aside from that, you know, I try to make sure when a problem is brought, I try to find a solution, unless the person who brings it has possible solutions. There's been times where I've been in uncomfortable, you know, dialogue or with people who we weren't on the same wavelength. But you, as a leader, you have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. So I won't lie. When I was at the VFW and there was over 200 people in there and it was just me, I'm like, oh man, I'm like, they about to eat me alive. But you have to be able to be willing to have those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. And I feel like I've shown I've been able to do that, and I'm willing to do that, and I'll continue to do that. You know, even if it's not the most popular thing. I'll speak about the elephant in the room, the special election. I was talking about doing the appointment, and we've heard from the residents, but it wasn't until I spoke to residents offline and sat down with people, and they really broke down where they were coming from, where I was like, you know what? There's a different way to go about this, and I changed my vote. So being willing to listen, I feel like I've done a great job, and I will continue to do so. If there's room for improvement, I'm here for it, and I'm willing to listen for the next 4 more years. Regardless, I'll be involved. If it's me who wins, I'm gonna be still working with Mr. White or whoever. And if it's vice versa, I'm still gonna talk to Mr. White too, because there's pointers and things I can give to him that can make him a better councilman, or things that can benefit him in the future. So it's just about a willingness to work with one another, even when it's uncomfortable. And I feel like I've done a great job in doing that and trying to provide solutions when there's been problems in front of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sponsors of the debate, thank them both candidates for coming out to meet with us this afternoon. We appreciate your help. Mr. McGee, thank you for your help as well. This debate is now closed.
Wait. You missed the button. Oh, sorry, buddy. I was getting to you. Yeah, okay.